Hello everyone, I wonder if this is working. Hopefully it is. Hopefully this is public, and hopefully it's working. We'll always see. And all the other stuff is on. It is education, it's all done. Yeah, that is now working. Hello, and this is Operation Tan No.2. Not sure if anyone's found this yet, but I'm going to share a link. I'm going to go back to the other one, which was supposed to be going. Hopefully not lose the one which is working. And ooh, why is that working as well? Okay, that shouldn't be working as well. Okay, this one I'm going to end. It's not working according to mine. Ooh, it shouldn't be working. No, it's not working according to mine. So I'm going to get rid of this by basically deleting it. Content live. Hello everyone. Sorry about this. The live which was supposed to be live isn't working. So the live which wasn't working, I'm now having to delete to stop it working because it's actually causing issues. Right, let's go back to this. Let's go to go live. And let's hope that's working. Hello everyone. Hope this is now working. Hope this is working and happily working. Woo! No, new link, everything's working. That's good. It didn't like it for a second because I had both of them running. And that was causing it to have a panic attack. The other one hadn't started running for some reason. I do not know why, but XSplit couldn't connect to it. We'll work that one out another day. We will work that one out another day. Hello, everyone. Right then. So, last night, of course, was Romans. Last night, of course, was Romans. Tonight is the Japanese. And before I jump into this, I'm going to talk about this. But Operation Tan No.2 has always interested me because it's one of those scenarios where the Japanese keep claiming it's going to be a decisive battle. But again, their actual commitment of force completely doesn't sync up with the idea of it being a decisive battle. So hello Felix B, hello Tan No.2, hello Carl Gasberg, hello Tim Richards, hello Don Giovanni, hello Team Locker, hello Paul Bestwick, hello Abuzaski, hello Dan Reganhammer, hello Sana Canero, hello DG4T, hello Night everyone. The Blackburn has formed a cult. It's formed a cult for quite a while. We'll leave that to one side. Unless Putin, etc., decides they are going to be the head of the Blackburn cult, in which case there might be problems. Hello, Ron Cash. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Doxson. Hello, Andrew Bend. Hello, Andrew Paul. Hello, Wayne Borin. Hello, Yodi Sage. And hello, Peter Dawson. No sacrifices were required, but I did scream at, possibly scream at good old Microsoft for a little while. It's fun sometimes, it really is. And let's see. So, tonight is the 77th anniversary of Operation Tan No.2. It literally happened 77 years ago today. That is the joyous thing about it. It happened 77 years ago. I'm not talking about something which, is sort of abstract. Yes, it's basically gone from one area of history to another area of history. From something which was 2,200 something years ago, yesterday, to 77 years ago today. Which is pretty much the gamut of this channel, although I do go a little bit more recent than World War II if I want to. I'm considering doing some stuff on the Falklands War later this year. I'm also considering avoiding it completely because I have so many friends who were involved in the Falklands War that I don't like to get involved in the debates that come about, depending on whose account you precisely follow. It's far easier to do if you don't say these things publicly. Nice hearing. If this was Tan No.2, then what was Operation Tan No.1? I'll be explaining that. I will be explaining Operation Tan No.1 and what it was. Okay, hello Jack Ray. Hello. He's the enemy of the cult. Okay, well, as long as the Putin's the enemy of the cult, the Blackburn cult can't be that bad. And let's be honest, considering how actually ungainly, unflighty, and all the other things that the other directives you can describe the Blackburn with, let's be honest, the odds of this cult actually achieving anything are not that high. Why was this mission such a disaster? Well, there are many reasons for why it's a disaster, but honestly, we'll start off with the most common one. Tan No.2 fails because ultimately the entire concept behind it is a failure. And yeah, that's what I'm going to start off with. That's what I'm going to get into. And that basically tells you what this evening's going to be like. If I'm already telling you from the beginning that the concept of the operation was a complete and utter failure, well then. Team Lockup, we don't tend to admit that. And in the nicest way, my mum is 21. I, on the other hand, am 35 this year. But my mum is 21. So is my sister. And my mum's twin sister, my aunt. And my dad's sister, one of my other aunts. And pretty much every woman in my family is only 21. I'm not sure how it happens, but it's amazing. The men we get old, but the women every birthday is 21. Okay. Well, they both know history, so in a way, tightly related, if not by space or time. Yeah. It is kind of like Warhammer 39k talking to about Warhammer 41k. How did Japan manage to do Operation Tan No.2 with no carriers? Pretty much they were lucky and blessed with having long-range aircraft, but we'll get into that. So, let's start off with my normal I'm not advisement at this point, because, well, I'm just saying thank you to everyone for their kind generosity. The Haida trip is still getting more money. Thank you. Everything is pretty much going to it. All Patreon funding, all YouTube, all super chats, everything is pretty much heading towards the Canada trip. Because I want to be able to get around as many ships as possible, and I want to be able to do as much as I can while out there to make it really, really count. Also because I have this really part of me which is really looking forward to going to Canada and actually being able to wander around these things, because normally Canada and me, it's but no. Canada's 21, which planet? They claim Earth. My mum accepted she was old when she became a grandmother and finally stopped dyeing her hair. Oh. You look at your. Sorry, my mum disagrees with you. I'm happy your mum does. It's to each your own. They want to be 21 forever. I'm not gonna. But my view is honestly, I try and avoid celebrating my birthday as a whole. I just try and avoid the whole thing. No. Thank you very much, everyone who's put any money towards it. I will make sure there is a link down below because I get told off when I forget it. I get comments from you going, "You haven't put a link into your PayPal," and I go, "No, I forgot. Sorry." And then I feel bad, but also it makes me feel kind of even slightly worse because you're being so generous, and then I forgot to put a link in. Now, 77 years ago today, Operation Tan No.2 went into process. And you have to remember with this operation, the big thing about it, and what I'll be discussing a lot, is reconnaissance. It is massively based upon the use of, well, the finding of and making sure when the enemy is. And that's another reason why I like to look at this particular operation, because I consider it one of the best operations of World War II as a model for modern warfare and a model for the realities of modern warfare, which tends to get me into trouble because people go, "But you're talking about a kamikaze operation." And I go, "Well, replace kamikaze with long-range cruise missiles." And suddenly you find you're dealing with a very interesting operation which has a lot of things interplaying with it, which are not too dissimilar. And that is the reality. It's a case of, it's one of those operations where you might think it's going to be very straightforward, very simple, and might think they would actually operate on a keep it simple, considering the complexity of the task they're going for. But no, there is actually a lot of complexity built into it from the get-go. From the very get-go. And Jermaine, wow, that's great. The women in my family get to 29, then they stop. Well, it does kind of give you an idea of the information battle going on. And this is where we get into the Pacific War in 1944. Okay. Honestly, by 1944, most people would agree that Japan's goose is well and truly cooked. And when I say well and truly cooked, I mean completely and utterly well and truly cooked. It is. There is nothing there which they can possibly pull out of it. They are gone. Sorry, I'm going to be annoyed with something and I'm going to have to remove the slideshow and add it in again because the new version of XSplit doesn't allow me to change the timings of slides while it's live. I have to delete it and then reload it. Just to be annoying, aren't you? Yes, that's what you are. You're annoying me. Auto refresh. And go through. There we go. Right. So, The point is, the only ones who don't seem to realize they are licked in any way, shape, or form is the Japanese. And they're still envisaging carrying out a decisive battle. And in fact, in 1944, May 1944, they start off by planning Operation Yuko, which was a force centered on the first mobile forces, Daiichi Kado, the Kido Battalion, 9 aircraft carriers with air screening ships, plus 4 escort carriers with a total of 530 aircraft, would gather, depart from the inland sea, and would go forward to engage the enemy. They would then attack the US Navy at Majuro, which was their critical forward fleet base for the USN at this point. They would be supported by 300 land-based aircraft, flying from Marcus, Wake, Truk, Ponape, all to assist in the carrier bombardment. And lastly, 5 submarines equipped with 10 aerial torpedo-equipped amphibious light tanks would arrive on the atoll. The tanks would be launched to coincide with the attack, cross the coral reef, and attack the carriers in the anchorage to make sure they sunk as many US carriers as possible. Does anyone think this sounds like the Japanese battle plan from the Philippine Sea? I mean, literally, today, before I watched, I sort of went live and sort of this, I've had mine and I've had Drax videos on the Philippine Sea on. And this sounds like exactly the Philippine Sea battle for Yugo. And we know how that worked out, so we have an idea how Yugo might have worked out. Yoda Sage, the expert of which you speak seems to be a raw pain in the fundamentals. Do we need a software fund for all one of them? Believe it or not, XSplit is actually the best of the worst bunch. It's quite good. One of the things, I liked the older system better than the new system. The new system is supposed to be more intuitive and better for you, and I'm going, no, it really isn't. Show me the older system. But no, I'm on the professional version of XSplit now, and hopefully once I get... It will get improved once I get a tower unit set up. Basically, take off the tanks, and you have the Philippine Sea. Cash, is it complex like sail really quickly up, pick up an army, turn around and face the enemy again? Not quite that bad, but getting close. Isn't the P1Y1 France a terrible kamikaze aircraft? Oh, trust me, there are far worse kamikaze aircraft. For example, the Blackburn. Machine Gun is fighting you tonight. Machine Gun is probably problematic this evening, yes. Hello, submarine history. Yeah. The problem with this whole strategy, and the whole problem with the Japanese in 1944, and it just gets worse as 1944 goes on, is they are winning these glorious battles, but these battles keep getting closer and closer to Japan. They are fighting gloriously, but they're getting closer and closer and closer to Japan. And it's getting more and more difficult for them to get supplies. And it's the US submarine force which is really doing the work on the Japanese supply lines in the Pacific. They're really doing the work on them. And sort of all those little seas you see up the coast of Asia, on the coast of Vietnam and China and Korea, all those areas, that's where US Navy submarines called home. This was Operation Yugo. It wasn't the Battle of the Philippine Sea, but it's very similar to it. So this is the mentality of Japan and of its leadership at this point. They are, I put this politely, they're stuck in a recurring loop. They can only think of it so far, and the way they think of it is, well, they always have a reason things have failed. It was technology. It was the commanders. It was this. It was that. It's never the, hang on, maybe our doctrine is up the pole crap. Have any of us considered that? Anyone? No? Why not? And if you want a really good detail of this sort of history, there are some really good American sites which go into these operations. But, and this kind of goes with Dan Freeman's patron suggestion, you'd always get the intent that all the Japanese are really obsessed with is the American ships and the American fleet. But actually, then that makes sense, because the Royal Navy fleet is just starting to turn up. They're not really a problem at this point, but they're becoming a big problem. Remember, Operation Tan No.2 happens not long before the Battle of Okinawa. If Tan 2 had actually succeeded, Okinawa would have had to be delayed by 6, maybe 8 months, possibly even as long as a year, which could add a year onto the war. They wouldn't win anything, but they have more time. And yes, Stephen Richards, we will be getting to the USS Randolph. Andrew Rawl just rightly said that US submarines managed to win their victory against Japan. The Germans really wanted against the British with their U-boats. Yes, but the thing is, the British had a sneaking little weapon that the Japanese really didn't invest enough in. It's called the anti-submarine warfare trawler, followed by the Flower-class corvette, followed by the various forms of River-class frigate and the Castle-class corvette, followed by all the V&W, four stackers, and every other destroyer they converted into an ASW escort. That's the thing. But again, Britain's industrial capacity. You can do it against Japan because their industrial capacity can't match you. Britain's industrial capacity was building the escorts. If it had been fighting a one-theatre war versus Germany, things would have been very different. Even if it was when it was fighting just against Germany and Italy, it was actually doing quite well because it had the rear areas to support the economy and grow things, and it was able to sustain itself. It's the moment it's fighting a global war, that's when it's going, oh, sugar. Gone from being, this is getting a little bit warm, but we'll find, to, oh my lord, I think we might need some shade. Ron Cash, was it just the Japanese high command who thought they weren't beaten? Did the people and soldiers, airmen, think that maybe their game was up? Well, usually I have a tough time explaining this, and the level of propaganda and information control being put across in Japan versus the reality. But for many people watching the television recently, there is an interesting phenomenon which they still not quite sure to believe, which is people in Ukraine calling relatives in Russia and telling them there's a war on, and the people in Russia saying, no, there isn't a war on, or there's this or that. No, not believing it at all. I give you Japan, 1944, 1945. Yes, there are probably a few Japanese people who are thinking and going, hang on, these battles are getting closer to us. But there again, for that, you have to know where these places are on the map. You have to know the geography. And you have to deal with the secrecy and also the honor and all the issues of Japanese culture at this time. So, yeah. The answer is half a dozen one, six of the other, to whether the people and the rest of the Japanese believed it. And also, there's a difference as to whether or not, if they believe, even if they believed it, were they going to act on those beliefs as if they believed it, or were they going to still act like victory was possible? Were they still willing to believe they could win? Just because you think the war is going badly doesn't mean you think you've lost it. Have you got that picture of HMS Sussex where the kamikaze hit her? Not for today's. I can find it. I have got it somewhere. I've got it in the county class slide. So it's in the, it is around. If I need it for the county class, I will sort of put it up. I've got to put it up later. Matthew, did IGN understand when attacking RN carriers that they were doing the attack the illustrious and indomitable implacable were designed for? Not really. But also you have to remember the IGN were actually having a rather interesting time because they'd been told by the Germans they'd sunk half these ships. And they were now fighting them. You have to always remember that. The Germans and Italians had claimed to sink a lot of Royal Navy carriers. Some of them many times over. We always talk about the Ark Royal being claimed to be sunk. Well, not far behind her is HMS Illustrious and HMS Victorious and Formidable. Are all quite often the Germans and Italians are claiming to have sunk them. And they have a habit of turning up in the Pacific and going, hello, we've got aircraft. We're taking part. And the Japanese look at them going, but you're supposed to be on the bottom of the Mediterranean or the bottom of the North Atlantic. What are you doing here? I don't know. I was given aircraft. I was told to go to Pacific. You're here. We're here. Let's have the version of a let's have a rumble. So, Operation Tan No.2 comes to being because, how do I put this politely? Yugo dies. Yugo dies because, despite being approved by Admiral Shimeda Shigatara, who was chief of the NGS, and Admiral Kogo Mineshi, Koga was killed when his flying boat crashed while on the route from Palo Alto, and whilst there was a huge debate over not only who would be in charge of this operation, who would claim credit for it, and remember, again, if you do watch my Philippine Sea video, you will notice I spend quite a lot of time critiquing the Japanese Higher Command and their selection of officers to run fricking operations. Specifically, the fact that they have more vice admirals than rear admirals on that particular jaunt. And the fact that they have 11 admirals on that operation to the American 13. And the Americans have 1 admiral, 2 vice admirals, and 10 rear admirals. The Japanese have 6 vice admirals and 5 rear admirals. That tells you a lot of what you need to know about Japanese command structure. They can't even decide to promote someone and make someone an admiral to make their chain of command work sensibly. And they're sending out vice admirals when they should be sending out rear admirals to do a job. That's how confused their command structure is. And actually, if I remember correctly from the Philippine Sea, one of the task group commanders is actually a rear admiral, whereas the vice admirals are all chucked into one battle group together, basically. It's just absurd. This is not a functional command structure. This is what I'm trying to make. I have talked about the various Japanese command officers, and I know there have been a few who, when I did that series about Japanese, basically the Axis commanders, and the Japanese admirals I finished off with, I know there were several that a lot of you weren't going, we've never heard of this person. And the reason you don't hear of them is because quite a lot of the senior officers, the Japanese higher command, were trying to keep out of the war for fear of having to share credit. So they benched a large chunk of their better admirals because they didn't want to share credit with a different faction. Anyway, this is Fushida Mito, leader of attack on Pearl Harbor, and is the person who develops the first plan for Operation Tan, which is called Operation Tan No.1. After a reconnaissance mission from Truk to ascertain what force was present, Fushida would lead a strike on American carriers at Majuro with 27 torpedo planes and 27 dive bombers. So, can I just please point this little one out? They were expecting there to be roughly 20 US carriers in Majuro. With escorts and all the defences around them. I'm not sure what level of hubris, narcissism, or ego you have to be to go, you know what, I'm going to attack one of the enemy's most strongly defended points with just 54 aircraft. When the original attack had called for some region of 900 aircraft. We go back. Yugo. Yugo is 530 carrier aircraft, 300 land-based aircraft, so that's 830 aircraft. Tan No.1, 54! What? What? Ron Cash, good luck with Wales versus France at rugby. Say hi to your dad. John Barrett, I heard about, I think, US's Wasp that was sunken ceremonial resurrections many times. Yep. Nice hearing it. So the Germans were feeding IGN propaganda. The Germans were believing their own propaganda. And also, in a nice way, why were the IGN believing the German propaganda? Have they forgot how difficult a US carrier is to sink? US carriers have very good battle damage control. They are not as hard to sink as US Navy, as Royal Navy carriers. I'm sorry, they aren't. But the thing is, it goes back to those assessments I've talked about before. If you're building 2 ships, you make them as impossible to sink as possible. If you're building 24 ships, you might well go, well, actually, I want to carry a slightly bigger air group, and I want to carry be slightly faster, and I want to be slightly easier to construct because I'm going to be building 24. So there's the fact that if I lose one, I'm not losing 50% of my fleet. So whilst I don't want to lose any ship, and I'm going to make them as well protected and survivable as I can within those limitations, there's also not a desire to go to the umpteenth degree of it, which is the US carrier explanation. Were there any attempts to build ships in place for the IJN other than mainland Japan? Because Burma and the Indonesian islands are very resource rich. Not really. And what's interesting is there are actually facilities theoretically in Singapore to construct ships, but most where you could have constructed this were definitely escort vessels. And they could have set up shipyards in Korea, as Darius Ralsky's put before. They don't want to, though. There is a limitation of funding, but there's also a limitation of desire. They see those places as vassal states, and they want to employ Japanese. Hmm. Were the IJM trying to pull Toronto? Basically, the IJM were trying to pull a second Pearl Harbor. A second Pearl Harbor was their dream. Don't think it's going to work with 54 aircraft. Richard, did the Japanese understand radar or just ignored it? They actually had their own radars, and one of the reasons some of their submarines get held up is being fitted with radar for this operation. So they knew about radar. Again, there is really no excuse for this other than hubris. There is just it's a okay. I suppose you could say, right then, well, they feel safe and secure there, so they're going to be lulled into the same false sense of security by their own ego as they were at Pearl Harbor. But the trouble is, the Americans have had Pearl Harbor happen to them. The phrase "never again" brings to mind the fact that most Sunday mornings on US Navy bases are some of the most high security periods they have in the week. It's gone from being this is the period where everyone's relaxing and asleep to being this is the period where you're going to find treble of the guard on duty. Probably easier to attack on a Monday morning now. Yeah, the Royal Navy did find out believing your own propaganda was very dangerous from Miser HMS Hood. The RN didn't believe their own propaganda. The British public and more probably some of the politicians possibly believed the propaganda. But you have to remember that most of the propaganda about the unsinkable Hood, etc., was not put out by the Royal Navy, because to the Royal Navy, Hood was a battle cruiser. If they were going to say any ship was unsinkable, it would have been the unsinkable Warspite, or Queen Elizabeth, or King George V. Maybe, probably Nelson and Rodney would have been marketed as unsinkable. Gunship, 9 aircraft, 100 aircraft planned. Plan when started 54. Are you trying to rise my blood pressure and blow my head gun? Yeah, this is one of the guys who's actually behind Pearl Harbor. He's a really smart guy. And I sit there and looking and go, okay, let's say you got 16 carriers there. Oh, let's go down. Okay, let's go right. So 54 aircraft. What's a nice team number that divides into 54? Broadly speaking. 14. Yeah, because it's roughly 4 aircraft per carrier. A couple will get 3, but 4 aircraft per carrier. So 2 dive bombers and 2 torpedo bombers per carrier, and you're expecting to guarantee kill that. Well, admittedly, it's not moving, so that's a good thing. But if it's not moving, that means if it's not operating aircraft, there won't be fuel in the fuel lines. The fuel, everything will be down below the main deck on a US carrier. So you'll probably just blow up a load of hangars. If you do fit torpedoes, is there space in the anchorage for the torpedoes actually to run, or will they hit the bottom? Like they did at Pearl Harbor. Because remember again, this is the point. The reason the Royal Navy attack succeeds as it does at Taranto is because the Royal Navy has spent a lot of time working out how to attack harbours with torpedoes and have developed a load of systems, as I've been over before. And I've done some 60-second videos about this, so if you're not sure about that, please go look at the 60-second video on aerial torpedoes. Because the trick wasn't just fins on the back and maybe an air bubble in the front, but the Royal Navy also added a detention wire at the nose. So it meant that the torpedo belly flopped. Because any angle almost of incidents like this when it hits the water will lead to it hitting the bottom rather than hitting a ship in shallow water. It's just not sensible. And then you go, right then, so you're planning on going with 27 dive bombers. Really? Can your dive bombers carry thousand kilogram bombs? Yeah. Basically, what happens is they start off with a plan you go, which would have 830 aircraft, nearly 900, pretty much. Is the plan. And then when that isn't going to work, they start working on plan Tan No.1, which has 54 aircraft. 18 times 3, so 18 carriers. So what? Two torpedo bombers and one dive bomber, or 2 dive bombers and 1 torpedo bomber per aircraft carrier? Yeah. 14, they might have a chance. Apparently RN Sailor thought it was unsinkable. Again, you can probably find reports. The Royal Navy is a large organisation, but most sailors understand the difference between a battle cruiser and a battleship. Also, it depends on what they're talking about when they're talking about an unsinkable. Honestly, as I said before, the whole point of the problem with Hood was she's actually in that battle. Now, Taryn, how does Operation Tan No.2 compare to one kamikaze doing what the rest of the IJN couldn't, knocking out the Grey Ghost USS Enterprise out of the war? A lone kamikaze like that, which managed to do the tricks it did, that takes skill. You can do that as one aircraft. You can't do that as 54. The Japanese plan to use Swordfish at night? No. And actually, before anyone starts joking too much, this is the thing. The US Navy's air defenses at night are still not that good. Yes, they have radar, but they depend on their radar-controlled firepower. So again, disturbingly enough, especially because they're aimed at faster-flying aircraft than Swordfish, if you actually had launched the Night Strike with a Swordfish, and I would have to run this through some sort of modelling software, you might actually, with 54 Swordfish, have managed to take out those carriers. But you're not going to do it with the Japanese aircraft and the Japanese aircraft. And the British probably wouldn't be doing it with the Swordfish at this point either. If the British were having to fight this at this point, they would use different aircraft and do it in a different way. Hello, Constitutionalists. So, Nakajima C6N Simon Painted Cloud. Now, why does this particular aircraft matter? Well, the C6N is a very specialist aircraft. It's otherwise known as, it can be also known as iridescent cloud as well as painted cloud. There's a debate over what it translates as into English. It's kind of like the word which translates as adequate from Russian to English, but in Russian it really means a combination of good, average, normal, all those sort of things. Well, it was the fastest carrier-based aircraft put into service in World War II by the Japanese. What was its role? Well, it's a carrier-based reconnaissance aircraft. Yes, everyone, this is how good and how confident the Japanese were with their plan to base their reconnaissance from their cruisers. They'd gone and designed a reconnaissance aircraft for their carriers. And it's actually specified in 1942, had been discussed in 1941, is specified in 1942. It's a reconnaissance plane with a top speed of 350 knots, that's 650 kilometers an hour, at a height of 6,000 meters, and for a range of 2,500 nautical miles. That's 4,960 kilometers. It was powered, and this is where it gets really quite sexy, by a Nakajima NK9B Homer 18-cylinder air-cooled radial pistol engine that developed 1,991 horsepower. It had a top speed, as said, of 380 miles an hour or 330 knots, a cruising speed of 240 miles per hour or 210 knots, and a ferry range of 2,900 nautical miles with auxiliary fuel tanks. However, in terms of armament, only carries a single rear flexibly mounted rear firing 7.92mm machine gun. So it definitely is built on the idea of you shouldn't fight for information. Now, the Japanese are building this, and by the time it comes into service, there of course aren't many carriers for it to work from. But it's a very specialist aircraft designed for very specialist support. It is designed as a carrier aircraft, not really as a rough field aircraft, and believe it or not, there is a difference. A rough field aircraft can often be used as a carrier aircraft, basis for a carrier aircraft. But a carrier aircraft is often designed to go around the world with a level of maintenance support which you would normally find at the most advanced of home air bases. I.e., they have everything there. They have all the equipment. They have all the logistical infrastructure of such an airfield, major airfield at home, would have on the ship. So this wonderful beast proves as unreliable as anything because it's designed to be maintained, fettled, loved, and cared for in the environs of a Imperial Japanese Navy carrier, where it can have a team, the creme de la creme of aviation engineers poring over its every square millimeter, dusting and feathering and gently caressing and making sure everything works. Which is probably why in this operation, these are critical for the reconnaissance, and I'm going to keep saying the words, and that broke down, and that broke down, and it broke down, and it broke down, and that might well tell you what's going to happen in this operation before anything begins. Pretty bizarre. How could they think that this plan had any chance of a chance? I'm presuming you're referring to Tan No.1. Don't worry, compared to Tan No.1, Tan No.2 is even more interesting. The US Navy rightfully were paranoid after the night battles off the Savo Island. They weren't necessarily that good at them in terms of air defense, but they were having naval aviation. It's one of the things the Royal Navy found over Okinawa. It's one interesting thing. One of the things that's often forgotten what they do in Okinawa is they take over the air defense at night. Pretty much, if you find aircraft airborne at night in over Okinawa, providing any sort of air defense or support, they're being command and control coordinated by the Royal British carriers. Because the British are far more used to doing those sort of night fighting operations than their American counterparts, because they've been doing it for most of World War II. Yes, they haven't always had to do it in the Mediterranean, but they kept it up. They always keep some sort of aircraft up there and some sort of maintenance and night flying operations. And they have a far higher pool in terms of percentage numbers of aircrew to draw from for it. The Americans do end up setting up dedicated night fighting carriers, which is cool and very useful. They're critical for the Americans to operate. But the Royal Navy never goes down that route. The Royal Navy always goes, Basically, it's a version of what's it called? Starship Troopers. Everyone flies every hour, day and night. Everyone fights, and everyone gets fed. To paraphrase it. Abridge and adapt, anyway. On camera, for this sort of target, the Brits would have used stripped-out Lancasters with earthquake bombs, or if no available with within range short Sunderlands. There would have been a option considered. Probably an aircraft carrier would have been found. Right, 7.92 is Russian, or used by them. It is, but it's also used by the 7.92mm Type 1 machine gun was... How do I put this? Basically, it's one of the products of the weapons which they had got from the Germans. Sort of. No, it's a great. Shinana and Tayo had them in the air wing. Pretty much. They get a couple. Not many. And again, don't take this the wrong way, but it's they build 463. Not many of them get to operate from aircraft carriers. Richard, did C6N have a self-sealing fuel tanks, or was it a tinderbox? How do I put this politely? The fuel tanks are theoretically capable of things that preserve them. However, their quality control was not always that brilliant. So, and you have to remember, one of the troubles for us when it comes to Japanese aircraft is a lot of our knowledge is based on ones which were crashed and what people told us after the war. A lot of design specs and stuff have been were destroyed. Everyone flies, everyone fights, and everyone gets fed is more like space. 2063 above and beyond. Perhaps there'll be in a computer game sometime. I'll be able to go, I came up that line. Anyway, that's the Nakajima C6N. It's... Well, how do I put this right? It has a 3-person crew. All the equipment's arranged in a line along the fuselage. It's incredibly for an aircraft. It's going to sound strange. Okay, all right. So it has a length of 11 meters. That's 36 foot, 1 inch, and a wingspan of 12.5 meters. But it's incredibly narrow body. It is. It's really narrow. It's massively dwarfed by its 4-blade constant speed propeller. However, they have all these plans come up, and then you know what the US Navy does? They move anchorage. They move to Alifi. And they put all sorts of facilities there because Alifi is amazing. And by the way, don't take this the wrong way, anyone. But for those of you who are of a modern warfare, I want to start sort of doing simulations and think about what the realities of conflict might be in a modern war. You will want to look up Alifi. because it's still a massive anchorage that can hold over 1,000 large ships. It has still got some facilities there dating back to World War II, which, okay, will need upgrading, but they're still there. But more importantly than all of that, and I say this with an open heart and nothing but love for the US Navy, it sits at a pretty good point. If you were fighting a war in the Western Pacific for any particular reason, Alefi is still very, very well located for supporting operations in that particular part of the world. It's within the sweet spot of being close enough you can get ships to it if they're damaged, but far enough away it's probably going to be fairly safe, because it's going to take an actual effort to reach it. Nice one. Was the Yokosuka B4Y Gene a feared weapon like British Swordfish, or was it overlooked? Thompson van der Velde. But it's an interesting time. The whole discussion over whether or not a USS Enterprise was in a decent condition enough to be preserved. I agree. She was. I would agree with everyone who's saying that from what was written about her, she was in decent enough condition to be preserved. But as a few other people pointed out in the chat, she wasn't getting enough. There wasn't really enough support for it. Oh, wait, the Japanese had bombers and radar. Okay, it looks rather primitive as opposed to Western German systems, but it's something. Yeah, the Japanese weren't as behind on radar. Again, I would refer you to Bill Trump's where we had Trent Lenko and the others of Section 22 investigation group on, who were they're all the historian sort of people looking into the history of the Section 22 team, which was the specialists in Japanese radar in the Allies. And Japanese radar was not necessarily as bad or as we often think it's not as good, and the Japanese aren't developing radar. The true thing is the Japanese don't deploy radar as well as we do. It's more of a lack of industrial capacity to scale it up into production than it is necessarily a lack of ideas on how to develop radar. Hi, Savard. So when does China take out the lease? Well, that's going to be an interesting thing. It's part of the Federated States of Micronesia. And honestly, I would be very keen on making sure that I had access to it. Whichever one I was. Did the Royal Navy have an Alefi of their own? Not really. The Royal Navy couldn't use Alefi when they need to, but they had other spaces. And they also, of course, whereas the US Navy, you must remember, are needing to develop these things because of them operating from the other side of the Pacific. The British are operating from Australia by this point, as they're forward operating. And they have the Indian Ocean support, and yeah, they do move some things up, but not. They don't quite set up an island base. Not quite. But no, Alefi is important. But now, of course, this changes the scenario, because Alefi is very different to Majuri. It's a different space to go and attack, and it's going to require a different methodology to attack it. But, and this is perhaps more important, yes, that is an Iowa in a floating dry dock up there, which was from Alefi. It still presents a problem of how do you get there. Don't worry, Stafford. It's just a case of, we know where the Americans are, now we need to watch them. Now they need to watch where they were and what they were doing. And make sure they were there when they turned up, because they were going to be quite a long way. It gets even more fun when you start to see it, when we get to the Japanese plan. It gets even more fun. I will warn you now and give you a heads up. This is going to get fun. So, now we've got through Tan No.1, which was the same place as Yu-Gi-Oh! So this is what we're up to. We've looked at Yu-Gi-Oh! We know that the Japanese are suffering, have been falling back, and they're looking for a decisive engagement. They want to sink a lot of US Navy ships because I think that'll be decisive and will win them the war. In fact, some admirals are referring to this operation as a game changer. It's going to change the course of the war. Yeah, right. So, Tan No.2 starts to be developed. And for starters, they put Commander Noroya Rosuke, who had previously led the fighters on Soryu, in charge of it. The new plan would include kamikaze Toko planes. And the idea was that after Leyte Gulf, they had done really, really well. They would be a new war-winning weapon. Yes, it was decided that they were going to be used to wipe out... Well, this is actually Task Force 38, but we all know they're after Task Force 58. But I can find a nice big picture of 38 all grouped together, whereas I can't find a big picture of Task Force 58 grouped together that actually shows up on the screen. Now, this plan is going to be kind of interesting. Vice Admiral Ugaki Matome, who had been one of the officers in charge of Hyuga at one point, approved Tan No.2 with enthusiasm when it was brought to him in early February 1945. However, there is a small problem. Okay, it gets delayed to March. I'll be telling you more about it in a second, but the reason it gets delayed to March is because the Japanese start doing reconnaissance. A, the reconnaissance aircraft keep breaking down. And B, this is the important thing, they keep finding the US Navy missing. They found this on Majuro. Previously, when they've been working out there, before doing the reason Tan No.1 doesn't get launched is because the C6N1's long-range reconnaissance planes actually fly from Tinian on the 3rd of June 1944, fuel at Truk, and then fly to Nauru to refuel again before the reconnaissance. They and then under Chiyotaiko led them, joined those two aircraft, two working aircraft by this point, on the 4th of June. He flew to Marjo, managed to find 8 fleet and 4 escort carriers in the anchorage, took pictures and flew back to Truk. After refueling, he flew to Tinian to deliver the recon photos to Fushida. However, American airstrikes on Truk prevented the mission, and once he got there, he was basically stuck in Truk. And then he flew another reconnaissance mission on 9th of June 1944. This is for Tan No.1. And from Truk to Majuro and back to Nauru, but found that Majuro's anchorage was empty. Task Force 58 had departed to invade Saipan. In September 1944, after they moved to Ilifi, they set up residence there really over the next month, and now they're operating there from about October. That's when they start doing the reconnaissance for Ilifi. And again, they send out the C6Ns. And again, as said earlier, they have fun. So, here is an example. On the 11th of February, the C6N Simons took off. 2 returned to base. They were sending out 7 C6N Simons to truck to do the reconnaissance. 2 returned straight away to base, and 1 ditched. You're down to 4. After an overnight stop at Chidori Airfield, 2 at Iajima, 4 landed at Truck. But 1 was wrecked on landing, now down to 3. However, when they got to Truck, because they were specialised carrier aircraft, there was neither spares nor field parts available to service them. Guess what's going to happen to your 3 aircraft, which have now successfully made it to Truck? How long do we think they're going to be useful for? Because, again, and they land there, at Truck on the 12th of February. On the morning of the 13th of February, the only flyable C6N takes off for a reconnaissance sortie over Ilifi. Approach the anchorage, and there are no carriers there. Does spot that there are now anti-submarine nets at the entrance into Ilifi's anchorage, after recent experience with Kaiten submarines. It's fun. Ouch. Thomas, I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope you get better soon. Second half stacks are not good things. Where can you build infrastructure for Ilifi? Is Ilifi still used? Ilifi could still be used, and infrastructure would be like you did it in World War II. You take it with you. It's a good place to go and take floating dry docks, etc. too. Wait, did the Japanese ever launch 2 engine planes for carriers? We think they did some testing, but I've seen competing reports about whether or not they actually did or not. But they did look into them. Rather like the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy actually gets around to it properly at the end of World War II and actually implements it after World War II. Alarm 6365. Colin Cameron. Someone calls something a game changer. Stop listening to Meadley and shuffle them off to some job where they think they can't get in the way. Ah, the Peter Principle. No. Wait. And they were going to do this with Yokosuka P1Ys? If those were radar equipped or flight leader walls, they might have had a chance. I do say a chance, and that radar would backfire. It's going to get interesting. I'm glad you're doing well, Thomas. I need a big map of the Western Pacific, preferably taking from the period in question. Tell me something. Any recommendations? Okay, well, we'll go back to this map. So if I expand this up in 1944. So, Ilifi, well, Ilifi is part of the sort of the Carolina Islands and and northern Marine Islands. It's not far from Guam. So where you see Guam, there is, if you just go slightly to the south and slightly to the west of Guam, you will find Ilifi on this map. Now, Truk. Well, that's fine. Truk. Truk is at the sort of western end of the Caroline Islands. And they're all part of the Federated States of Micronesia. They're all these little small islands which honestly don't do anyone any harm, but do have a habit of getting fought over in history. And you can see where the island hopping campaign is going, and you can see where also MacArthur's campaign is going on this map. And again, I would also recommend The War at Sea by Faulkner. That is a really, really good book. And really good maps. I've got it behind me somewhere. There's somewhere around. Yeah. Anyway, here is the plan for Tan No.2, because I think I've held you all in suspense for this plan not long enough, and I can't be that cruel. I have to explain it to you. So, here is the plan. 24, Yokosuka, P1Y, Ginga, Milky Way Francis, twin-engine bombers, originally from the 762 in NAG, but by the 7th of March they were called the Azusa Tobetsu Butai, or the Azusa Special Attack Squad Unit. These had a crew of 3, a cruising speed of 200 knots, a 1,036 nautical mile range, and can carry 2 500-kilogram bombs or a single 1,764-pound torpedo. Along with 5 4-engine Type 2 Kwangashi H8K-2 Emily flying boat pathfinders. 4 large land-based bombers were supposed to supplement the H8Ks, but don't seem to really turn up and take part much at all. And 3 submarines to be used in roles from logistics, rescue, and most importantly, the C6Ns were responsible for reconnaissance. And yes, that is the proposed flight plan. They were looking at weather, and they thought they would thread through a storm and go all the way from the Japanese home islands all the way to Ilifi to strike. Yep. Wayne Boren. Good luck, Wayne Boren. FRA staring, a fluffy research assistant staring at you means that they want something. So, there is the plan. I think that was the first spot of the day, Stafford. You managed to squash them. I wouldn't call the IJN command idiots, but they certainly do believe drink their own Kool-Aid, whereas the RN High Command possibly does occasionally fall prey to the same thing, but usually there's someone else in the RN High Command going, "You're idiots! Stop drinking that! You've had too much beer!" And that usually works. Usually that person doing the shouting is either in the interwar period has the name Henderson, occasionally in the World War II period has the name Cunningham, usually Andrew, sometimes has the name Vian, usually involving him doing something slightly ruder, and occasionally involves all sorts of things. There was actually one interesting account I read, which is the reason Vian was sent out to the Far East when he was doing was it was basically necessary to have him on stand just in case Mountbatten got out of hand, because Vian, of course, has managed to maintain a very robust friendship with Mountbatten over the years, where they are able to be incredibly frank and fair with each other. Which was code for Vian is one of the few people who can actually tell Mountbatten he's being an idiot to his face, and Mountbatten will listen to him. We do not sure know how Vian has accomplished this feat, but it is worth it. One of the accounts of Vian as a young officer who was friends with Mountbatten includes him punching Mountbatten on occasion. Although it's of course it's one of the more how do I put it, suspect accounts, because it's literally just one source which just it. And says they got into a fight. They still remained friends, but Mountbatten had been reined in from some strangeness. And if Vian is the one reining you in, you know there's a problem. Also, Casper John, he's another good one for going to the Admiralty. Excuse me. Yes? Are you completely and utterly insane? Captain John, can you explain why? Well... Ilifi, basically just a straight line from Japan to Ilifi. You'd hope it was a straight... It's a straight line straight into the storms, and then it gets more interesting. So, Vanderbilt, the fact the US had turned Ilifi into a naval base shows exactly why they were losing the war. But that's again a repetition of Port Arthur, Pearl Harbor. Yeah, it's a case of. And don't take this the wrong way, but their targets the whole time are the carriers. I would be hitting the floating docks. That's what I'd be after in Ilifi. If I'm going on to Ilifi, what I'm going to hit is the floating docks. Because that's going to cause them to have to take the carriers back a long way to repair them. That's going to reduce the number of carriers they can have operating on station. That's going to slow things down far more. Carriers are far easier to replace than floating docks. It's literally the lightning symbols at the bottom are storms. Literally, you can see there's a nice little thing written on the side next to them. Storm zones. So, the IGN decided that they would have 3 submarines to support the strike. These included a 2,607-ton Type B3 I-58 under Commander Hashimoto Moshitsura, the guy who would sink the Indianapolis. And she was to serve as a radio beacon for the P-1Y Gingas. So the idea was that she would go down there, have a beacon going off, and make sure they found the correct island. Which we can all consider how good that is. Yes, we're going to set off one of our largest and most unarmed submarines, and we're going to use it as a radio beacon. My, what a good idea. Yes. US Navy, of course, has never heard of this thing called anti-submarine warfare operations. No, they have no idea at all. Then they had the HA-106, which was a 370-ton cargo submarine, which was to cruise off Minami Daito-jima in order to pick up ditched air crews. And, well, about it was going to position itself 500 miles northwest of the location of the I-58 was supposed to be putting itself. And also the 1,779-ton Type D1 transport submarine, the I-366, which had only been completed in October 1944, had made one supply run to the Pagan Islands, and was now under command of Lieutenant Junior Grade, JG, Tokiaka Takami. And that was tasked to carry out a similar voyage to the mainland island in the Walloon Atoll via truck. A Type 13 air search radar was installed in addition to a Type 22 surface search radar to enable her for those operations. She departs on 29th of January 1945 at 1 o'clock. She's carrying 60 tons of cargo, including 33 tons of aviation fuel. And that's important because she's supposed to get out to the islands and drop stuff off at truck, which will support the C6Ns. So this operation, is dependent on submarine-based logistics and submarine-based targeting, submarine-based recovery, and a large number of single-engine aircraft flying a long distance over sea and navigating and hitting the right point, even through a massive electrical storm, to hit their targets. And how many aircraft are they sending in? Oh yes, they are sending 24 strike aircraft. So, we had the starting off point with 830. There we have gone down to 54. And finally, we have reached a strike group of, drumroll please, 24 suicide aircraft. 24 suicide aircraft. I'm not sure who was in charge of planning, and I know there is a legitimate reason to start thinking, going through these operations and go, well, you know, they were trying the best with what they had available. But and I say this as a very important but, they're talking in some of their sources, and it's one of those things. You read some of the Japanese accounts of what's going on in these operations and the way they're talking about them, and I have to say, some of these accounts can get pretty darn depressing when you go through this particular battle operation. They're all talking about this, and this with 24 aircraft, it's going to be a decisive victory. Against what? Here is the dirty little secret, okay? If we are just talking about Essex Clarke's aircraft carriers, the US Navy is building 32. They complete 24. When it comes to the Midway class, they are building 6. They'll complete 3. So, in simple terms, they have 38 carriers either in service or in construction in 1944. Or 1945. Right? This is not including the swarm of Independence class. This is not including the huge maelstrom of escort carriers. We're just talking major fleet carriers. If you can't kill more than high double digits numbers of those carriers, you are not going to affect US Navy operations one jot, because they will just keep building and they'll have the new ones in service. This is one of the reasons also the US Navy doesn't have to really worry about repairing aircraft carriers. They're building them. They do repair aircraft carriers, but honestly, they don't need to worry about it as much because they've got new ones coming into service. So, the reason this number of aircraft pains me so is because if you're going to do this kind of operation, at least put in the numbers that way you can actually make a difference. 24 aircraft. Wonderful. Try 96. Try 144. I don't know. Try 192. That will make a difference. Yes, you're talking about a huge number of personnel and a huge strike, but if you hit that kind of carrier, if you hit a carrier group with that many aircraft sitting in those bases, you will actually cause damage. You will actually possibly do enough damage to actually do your job, do what you're talking about. Not, they won't alter the course of the war, they won't change the outcome, but they will at least possibly buy you time, which is the only thing you're playing for at this point if you're Japan. You're playing for time. You are not going to achieve a decisive victory by 24 aircraft. This is the big problem with the Japanese and the whole Kantai-Kessen decisive victory doctrine. And please go watch that video of mine if you haven't already, because I do go into this in quite a lot of detail, and I'm quite proud of the Kantai-Kessen one. The whole point is, for a decisive battle, you have to be able to put decisive forces of your own in the field to achieve that battle. You cannot achieve a decisive battle if you do not put decisive forces on the field, at sea, into the action. 24 aircraft is not decisive. You are talking and marketing the whole way through. The admirals are discussing, this is going to be decisive. This is going to achieve a great victory. Da 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 da. If you're really going to use suicide aircraft, which frankly are abhorrent, but if you're really going to use them, fine. But use them as the tip of the spear as part of a larger attack. So submarine-based targeting, I can see going well if you can got a great density of them and ignoring the 1,000 miles through a electrical storm. Why not use the cargo one for the radio? It depends on what ships we use for carrying radios, etc. Depending on their ability to actually have enough electrical power to support them. Well, think about the guys sent on these missions. I know. 72. You're sending 72 people to die, and you're not even giving them a chance to actually achieve anything in their deaths. All they've got to give you is their deaths. That is what they'll be giving you. And you're not even giving them a chance to do it in a way which actually will get the glory and honor and the victory which they're being promised. What are there? There are probably more ships in the utility than 23. Yes, that's another problem. There will be the things defending those carriers. Okay, assuming 50% loss radio by weather navigation errors alone, these are 12 planes going on to attack the US air defenses. You are going to be quite disappointed by that loss ratio. It goes way higher. Yes, the US Navy had 32 Essexes either in service or in production. They had 6 Midways either in service or production in 1945. But I never understood the logic going after the fleet carriers. Why did they never consider a tonnage war or hit the tankers and walls? Did the IJN never consider these strategies? They did, they just didn't implement them. They didn't see a way to implement them. They would focus on... How do I put this? The IJN sometimes remind me of the exercise, and the exercise forces. And it's kind of like what we're seeing in Russia and Ukraine at the moment, where they seem to be concentrating on winning the big set piece battles and forgetting about defending the logistics, etc. And presuming the enemy won't do that. The enemy won't do that. Like at the IGN, they're presuming everyone's going to fight a fleet battle, not worrying about it, and they're just going, well, we don't have the resources to do that, so the enemy won't do that. I now have visions of TF-3858 doing, ending up doing what some armored units do, and then having more tanks than establishment as write-offs or return to service, and ending up with a few spare fleet carriers return to service. It could be interesting. Yes, that's what I never understand about the Algerians' late war campaigns. They never ever seem to concentrate their forces. And yes, the Kantai-Kessin is a very good one. The concentration of forces. There are issues with the Kantai-Kessin, and there are other doctrines they have, but the problem is their actual implementation of it. Right. So let's start off by looking at the actual operation. And these are the Kwansky H8K Emily, and I do like these. I like these aircraft. By the time we are talking about, most of the aircraft involved are powered by Mitsubishi MK40 Kasai 25B 14-cylinder air-cooled radios with a 1,825 horsepower rating for takeoff, driving 4-blade metal propellers. They are, in many ways, what I would call the Japanese Short Sunderland, and they are a flying porcupine. They have 20mm Type 99 Model 1 cannon and bow, and 7.7mm Type 92 machine guns in the ventral port and starboard hatches. Plus, they have a 20mm cannon in a dorsal and tail turrets, and 7.7mm submachine guns into beam blisters, and they have all sorts of. Basically, you just keep adding on more guns. That's a great one. There's no point slamming your head against bedding. I mainly just look depressed. And they could carry 800 kilogram torpedoes, or 8 250 kilogram bombs, or 16 60 kilogram bombs, or depth charges, all sorts of things. They were pretty well armed and pretty well equipped. The H8K1 had a maximum range of 3,888 nautical miles. whilst the HSK-2L had a maximum range of 2,397 nautical miles. Interestingly enough, there are 112 HSK-2s built with 3,862 nautical mile range, and 36 H8KSLs, K2Ls built, and they're built 1943 to 45. The aircraft in question are listed as having a range of 3,888 nautical miles, which means I think it's quite likely for this operation that they actually used aircraft from the 1941 to 42 production of HSK-1s, H8K-1s, the original ones, because the K2s have a range of 3,862 nautical miles. The fact that they're very specific, that they were going for the even longer ranged aircraft, would suggest they wanted to make sure they got back. I just wondered a couple of times, what if they launched all these kamikazes in a constrained effort and gave them free reign for targeting? It would have been interesting. That would have probably been far, far more dangerous if they'd managed to actually concentrate their efforts. Could have lost a lot of a lot of allied shipping. So, now, as I've mentioned earlier, the 1,779-ton Type D1 transport submarine, the I-3666, was tasked to carry out a similar voyage to Mainland Island and then Wallock Atoll via truck. But she was loaded with a Type 13 air search radar installed, as well as a Type 22 surface search radar. And on 29th of January, was declared ready, and at 1300 hours, carrying 60 tons of cargo, as said, including aviation fuel, departed Yokosuka. She was seen off by Rear Admiral Owada Noboru, which is very rare. Imagine how often submarines go off to sea. Imagine how often a Rear Admiral, etc., shows up to say goodbye to them and good luck. However, the I-366 does not prove to be a very successful vessel for this. She has all sorts of issues, and to Admiral Owada's chagrin, according to one very interesting, I listed sort of sources of what phrases they use. They use chagrin. I would say more downright embarrassment. The I-366 soon signaled she was returning to base, as her shortwave antenna had a serious defect. She was repaired quickly, and 8 hours later, the submarine departed again, flying a kikusi, a floating chrysanthemum pennant, from her conning tower. Again, another mark of great honor. She spent a night off Tateyama and then started heading south. Now, one of the reasons these submarines were going out these ways was to try and chart out the weather as well. At one point on her journey, she is struggling against, at 20 knots, she's trying to, the wind speed at 20 knots, and she is struggling against 30-foot high waves, which keep flooding her diesels and carried away a significant part of her deck cargo. Yes, you heard it right. The Japanese were storing cargo on top of their submarines. Ow, wrong one. There you go. This is the I-366. Yes, it carried deck cargo. Well, this is actually the I-361, her sister. I can't find a picture of the I-366. I'm not sure why. I think it's because she doesn't really survive that long. But they carried deck cargo on a submarine. You know, this is deck cargo. Oh my. Did the IJN realize they were fighting a war of attrition against a country they had no hope of winning against? Intellectually, spiritually, no. It's never a sensible idea to put deck cargo on a submarine. The British occasionally get away with it in the Mediterranean, but that's the Mediterranean. If you're going out on the surface of the Pacific and you're going to be facing 30-foot waves, then it's not going to work. By 10th February 1945, she had better weather. However, she spots a cruiser on the southwesterly bearing. And here is the point again. I-366 didn't have any torpedo tubes. Why? Because she's a cargo submarine. So she doesn't have torpedo tubes. When she spots multiple vessels with the cruiser, she dives 200 feet to continue the mission. Eventually, she surfaces off Moan Island at Clarke, contacts the submarine base, but is advised not to enter the anchorage because of enemy air activity. She hides underwater again. She surfaces 12:30, and her cargo is unloaded. She departs the anchorage and heads to Milan at night. It was absolutely essential the material actually arrived when it did, because if it hadn't been, they wouldn't have had their only flyable C6N would not have been able to take off to sort over Liffey. And this is what she did on the 30th of February. If I-366 hadn't got through when she did, they would have had no reconnaissance aircraft with the range to go to Liffey operating from Truk. Unfortunately, when he reaches Liffey, there are no carriers there. None whatsoever. So they decide to postpone the operation until early March. Weren't they sending these IJN submarines to find storms and they get them deck cargo? Don't get me started. Yes, part of their job was actually reporting back whatever they found. Pretty much, if she hasn't turned up, there is no spare parts to operate any of the C6Ns, and there's also limited fuel for them. Her turning up is that important. On the 5th of March, a C6N actually goes and photographs 16 carriers sitting at a Liffey anchorage. There are 16 carriers there. On 9th of March, another, the same C6N with a different pilot, photographs 6 fleet carriers and 9 escort carriers of Task Force 58 in the living. He also spots a group including 4 carriers entering the atoll from the northeast. The details of these sightings are sent to Vice Admiral Hara and Admiral Toyoda. En route back from the base, the C6N is ambushed by 3 P-38s. Manages to escape from it, but it comes very, very close. And that would have been no more reconnaissance. After landing at Truk, IGN Intelligence identified the pictures from the pictures as 1 Saratoga type, 4 Essex types, 3 Independence types, 7 escort carriers, and 4 unidentified ships. And it's from this result that they add Toyoda, Admiral Toyoda, who I of course talked about in the Axis Commanders, Axis Admiral series, designates the 11th of March as D-Day for this operation. Now, if we go back and remember, they postponed it, so the submarines which were supposed to be assigned to this, like, I don't know, the I-58 here, a Type B3 submarine, were given other operations to go and do. Now you're going to love what happens now. And general, please tell me the I-36 was carrying spares for the C-6N. It was carrying spares and special fuel. And regular aviation fuel as well. So let's start off with the B3 I-58, right? So the I-58 at this point was carrying 4 Kai-10 suicide submarines. It was en route to Iijima to attack Vice Admiral Spruance's invasion fleet. However, Lieutenant Commander Hashimoto gets a call and is recalled to Okinawa Toshima, the Douglas Reef, to participate in Tan No.2. Because there are no other submarines that can do the role that they're planning on doing. Hashimoto responds back going, I expect to arrive at the Kaiten's launch position off Iwo in 1.5 hours' time. Surely can I not do this and then return? No. He is ordered to go back. So Hashimoto has to jettison 2 of his 4 Kaiten. So he jettisons 2. They're never going to be used for anything. They're just lost in the bottom of the ocean. And he returns with 2. He takes 2 back with him so he can proceed at full speed towards Okinawa Toshima, traveling surface most of the time, so he's at speed as possible, as he was worried about reefs in the area. Thankfully, his navigator did a very good job, and they made it back to where they were supposed to. So, all right. We have one submarine which is running around, which has no torpedoes and no ability to launch torpedoes, delivering vital supplies and fuel to islands where they don't have the facilities to maintain aircraft, which were not supposed to be operating from rough field capabilities, and they have no design function and facilities set up to deploy them anyway to support them without using submarines. And then we have another submarine which is 90 minutes away from launching a strike, which could have done actual damage to the invasion fleet and would have only delayed their arrival at the point they were supposed to be by 3.5 hours. And they cancel it. It's depressing me. It really is. It's depressing me. I know. So, on the 11th of March, 1945, Vice Admiral Ugaki addresses the Azusa Special Attack Unit. Remember, I told you they hadn't been the Azusa Special Attack Unit till the beginning of March. He describes being chosen for mission as a great honor. He stresses the seriousness of the hour, the B-29s raiding their homeland every day, and Iwo Jima being doomed. There were supposed to be 19 American vessels in Ilifi. Doesn't make sense. There will be an escort ships, etc. So I think what he means is 19 American carriers, escort carriers, fleet carriers, etc. Supposed to be in Ilifi. The key to success lay in reaching the target area unsuspected. If the mission commander considered the chance of success small, they should not hesitate to return to the base for another try later. Really? Considering how much effort has gone into trying this once? Combined Fleet also sent him a message extolling this divine chance. Again, it's 19 ships. Yes. Okay, fine. So, if you're going to sink 19 ships. Right. How many aircraft do you think you should be sending? What type of aircraft? Really? What type of aircraft shall we send? Okay. There's also another problem. The weather for these aircraft to depart was quite good. But the trouble is, these aircraft, which are their reconnaissance aircraft, have quite bad aircraft, and their departure is delayed. It gets airborne 2 hours, just 2 hours before the special attack unit takes off. Remember, the Emily's have a lot slower speed than the Gingers. And the H-8Ks were supposed to guide the P-1Y Gingers to Minami Daito Ojima and then return. So, basically, they send off two unit. The first three flying boats are the weather reconnaissance flying boats, and the second unit consisted of two planes, and the two planes are supposed to guide the P-1Ys. They took off at 0800 hours, the last one of them, of the Emily's. The Gingers, well, at 0900 hours, the 24 Yokosuka P-1Y Ginger attack bombers, led by Lieutenant Kurumara Nato, took off on a Toko mission. Each one carries a single 1,764-pound bomb. They're running 20 minutes behind when they set course due south from Cape Sata. So, 24 of these aircraft are going to try and take on the entirety of Task Force. Let's be honest, most of Task Force 38 is going to be in there. All the carriers there, and all the forces with them. I don't know. Why does obsession with carriers? It doesn't make sense. You might just as well order them to sink battleships instead of carriers. Infrastructure, yes. Well, if they'd gone after the floating docks, they'd have been far more successful. Now, here is the small issue with these Gingers, and I am not in any way a anti-Ginga aircraft, anti-Ginga in terms of my policies. They can be transferred as Galaxy or Milky Way. But their maximum speed is 340 miles per hour. That's 295 knots at 5,900 meters or 19,000 feet. They have a cruising speed of 230 miles per hour, 200 knots, at 4,000 meters or 13,000 feet. They have a range at that cruising speed of 3,340 miles or 2,900 nautical miles. This is going to be interesting. But again, 24 of them armed with a bomb each and supposed to commit suicide by charging in. All right, let's see. What happens to them, do you think? About 4 hours into the mission, the formation passes the submarine HA-106 off Minato Daimojiba. So they've got there. The five of the P1Ys turn back because of engine troubles. So they're now down to 19. 3 of them crash. Okay, so they're now down to 16. We're not sure whether HA-106 managed to rescue any of the aviators. Okay. I-58 takes up station off Okinawa Torishima and functions as a radio beacon for the bombers. Their Type 13 radar crew picked up the approaching planes. The submarine sent out a continuous long-wave radio signal. The P1Is were at this point flying 6,560 feet. None of the pilots saw the islands. But the H-8K Emily's registered Hashimoto signals, and the Emily Weather Reconnaissance plane turns back, and they are managing to keep everyone together. Okay. Remember, though, down to 16 already. Engine troubles began to occur once more. One of the H-8K Emily Pathfinders disappeared, and 6 P1Y Ginga bombers were forced to turn back at Kayonona, which meant they're down to 10 now. Okay? They've got 19 targets, 10 aircraft. From original starting point of 24. I remember someone said earlier, there's going to be about 50% dropout. We're already down below that. Then, of course, there's the rain squalls and the issues which they're trying to detour around. Tours, of course, increased distance and made it close to the Ginga's maximum range, burning precious fuel, and at least 2 more end up ditching the sea. We're now down to 8. 8 aircraft. Right then. 4 P1Ys of the Special Attack Unit crash landed on Yap. Okay. This is considered possibly due to the new type of radio altimeter installed on the Gingas not that long before they were used. Always good to install brand new equipment before people are going off on a suicide mission. Always lovely. So you're now down to 4. We don't know what happens to 2 of the others, but we do know that only 2 P1Ys actually reach Ilifi, both well after dark. They approached Ilifi at high altitude. They dropped tinfoil chaff to deceive the Americans' radars, then dove in and flew low to water. They were undetected. The pilot of the first Ginga radioed successful attack before crashing. And he hits the USS Randolph. The other Ginga mistook the lit baseball diamond on Mogmog, the adjacent recreation island, for another aircraft carrier and plows into it. So we start off with 24 aircraft. 2 actually make the strike. And of those, 1 hits an aircraft carrier and 1 hits a baseball diamond. I know I am possibly, to some people, sounding, I don't know, callous. But I'm not callous. I'm depressed. I'm sarcastic. I think it's an absolutely massive waste of life. It's absurd. It is absolutely absurd, this operation. 1 aircraft gets through. You launch 24, 1 aircraft gets through and hits the target. One of your pilots, by the time they get there, is so disorientated, they think a baseball diamond is an airfield, is an aircraft carrier. A baseball diamond is an aircraft carrier. I realize the US Navy likes to light them up so they can play baseball at night, but seriously? As Donragama says, and then it got worse. Pretty much the entirety of this operation, in the nicest way, this could be this poor group. I sometimes feel are like the Russian 2nd Pacific Squadron. Every time I talk through their attack, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse. And I realize the chat is making some very sensible comments about the damage to American morale by hitting a baseball field. But let's be honest. Let's look at this shit. This is the USS Randolph. This is her after the attack being repaired. You'll notice she still has a fairly complete air group. You'll also notice there is a big hole in her at the back. She is repaired on the over the period at Utili Atoll by the various maintenance ships that the US Navy has there, and is in service for Okinawa. In fact, the USS Randolph. Let's see, where she's put in which part, particularly is she's part of. Yeah, she is in Task Group 58-2. She is USS Randolph. She turns up. She's got 33 Hellcats, 24. Well, no, not 33 Hellcats. 57 Hellcats, 15 Helldivers, and 15 Avengers. Under command of Captain Baker. Yeah. She's back in service for the Battle of Okinawa, which, for those who aren't sure of, is April 1945. So the US Navy has a carrier missing a bit of its stern for the next few days. The losses, which are official losses, are 13 aircraft destroyed for the Japanese. They've lost 13 aircraft completely. The others have all been mechanically out of action. Between 60 and 70 killed. The US Navy has an aircraft carrier damaged, 26 killed, and 105 wounded. Not even a Pyrrhic fricking victory, it's a Pyrrhic fricking defeat. Wonderful. Repairs were complete in 3 weeks, and she was in action 4 weeks after Tan No.2. Yeah, as said. It's just there is the second aircraft crashed. Well, there was an access road and a small island, and there is some debate as to where she crashes instead of whether she was aiming for the baseball diamond or whether she was thinking the road was a carrier that ran next to the baseball diamond. But there were no deaths on there. There were several U.S. servicemen were injured from debris and ignited fuel, but no. And at one point during the Battle of Okinawa, Admiral Mitscher puts his flag aboard her because the kamikaze attacks knock out both Bunker Hill and USS Enterprise. Is that the USS Vulcan AR-5 next to the Randolph? I'm not sure which one of the ships it is. I think it could be the Vulcan, but I'm not 100% sure. There is some of the photos are sort of discrepancy in their captioning of it. It's depressing. It is. And I wanted to do this battle, and as I said, I put this in there because I put this in ages ago. And I wanted to do it on the anniversary, and I thought, well, I'll put it in, I'll do it, and I'll do it properly. And I have to admit, yeah, Long Patrol for this comes out on Monday. So, summary. Hi, George Newman. Oh, MacArthur in the Philippines. That's fun. Anyone whose ego is slightly smaller than the Japanese High Command. Well, yeah, I think it probably is Vulcan, but there are some ships which are similar. So we have pictures from Okinawa here as the summary. We have Bunker Hill on fire. We have Yamato sinking. We have Formidable being hit and doing what Formidable does when she's hit. Going, I make more smoke out of my funnel than you do when you hit me. And we have, of course, Hellcat. Trent Linger, I need a break from Ukraine. Your humor is a tonic. I'm not sure if this is going to be full of humor. Mostly full of sarcasm. This is... I'm not sure about the ego. His may be larger. Yes, MacArthur's ego may be larger, but MacArthur never was quite as bad. The whole operation, let's put it this way, it starts off with quite a reasonable operation. Don't take this the wrong way. I don't think this would have worked. I have a feeling it would have fallen apart just as the Battle of the Philippines Sea did. But this, Yugo, is an actually legitimate operation. It has a chance. Okay, if you actually catch the carriers, if you manage to somehow hide it from the Americans that you're coming by not broadcasting and not talking about it, and pull off an actual strike on the Americans, you could do a lot of damage with this circumstance. It would be the second Pearl Harbor. This would not have been a second Taranto, but it would have certainly done a fairly large chunk of damage. We're talking shorter range operation. We're talking more aircraft involved. Well, it's got 54 versus 24. It's got more than twice the number of aircraft for starters. It's got a mixture of dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and you also have to think about when people are going in for suicidal things. Oh, my engine's not working. Do I want to really do this? Because again, you'd think if you're thinking, well, my engine's playing up, I'm going to be committing suicide anyway. Well, I'm doing this for the Emperor. I will keep going. I'll keep going. No, I'm going to return home because the engine's not working. Yes, you can make the case, well, I do not. It would be pointless to waste my aircraft and my life if I cannot hit anything, but there are a few ones which get frickin' close. And one of the things I will say is the kamikaze aircraft, especially when they're flown by experienced crews, do tend to suffer a rather high level of issues. And then we have Tan No.2. We have something which it just doesn't make sense. Because firstly, let's be honest, any aircraft hits a Liffey, it's going to just tee the Americans off that actually you're planning on striking a Liffey, and it's kind of like the attempts to force the Dardanelles and the Chiton attack on a Liffey and the various other things. You're basically tipping your hand when you're not actually going to do anything. You know, if the Royal Navy had turned up to do Dardanelles, really pushed it hard by having 3 dreadnoughts, as I've suggested in the past, fitted with false bows and sealed off fronts so they could take mine hits and just keep going, and voltages, etc., and had some properly formed up marine armored army units with them straight behind, and just go charge through, past all the forts, blowing up, turn up off Constantinople, Istanbul, and just land troops. That would have worked. In this case, if you're going to attack a Liffey, which is fairly well defended and has such a vast quantity of targets, then it behoves you to turn up properly. Not launch a strike which falls apart, and in the end, only 2 aircraft arrive. And I'm not sure which crew I feel most upset for. The crew who hit the Randolph, which has absolutely no effect at all, pretty much, on American operations. Yes, it kills 26 people, and that is terrible. That all lives you don't want to be lost. But as far as American carrier operations go, oh, we're down a carrier for a couple of weeks. Oh, however will we survive? Oh, we are so terribly crippled. It's a pointless waste of life on both sides. And then we have the other one which hits the freaking baseball diamond. I mean, the frigating baseball diamond. Yes, it's aiming for a road. Yes, I suppose a road could look like an aircraft carrier. But how badly trained is the pilot and the aircrew that they actually mistake a road for an aircraft carrier? How little training have you been doing with them? Because aircraft carriers are quite big 3D objects. Roads tend to be quite flat. It's just... And do you know what I love even more? Is the result listed on Wikipedia. Listed result as inconclusive. It's not inconclusive. The result is pointless. How can it be inconclusive? The Americans have all sorts of aircraft carriers there, and one's damaged. Yes, they have a few killed and a lot more wounded, and they don't like losing that. But again, compared to the thousands upon thousands of personnel they have, that's not going to hold them back. The Japanese lose 13 of their aircraft and about 70 killed. That's a Japanese loss. The only reason you can claim it's inconclusive is because technically the Americans have more wounded. Because the Americans have less killed, if we're going by that metric, which is a terrible metric, but we do sometimes go by that metric to work out who wins a battle. They don't lose aircraft. They only have one ship mildly damaged. It's back in service in a couple of weeks. Are the Japanese going to get those crews back from anywhere? No. And you know what's worse? Only 3 of those crewmen of those aircrew are actually killed carrying out the operation. Unless you count the 3 who also died plunging into the baseball diamond, in which case you've got 6. So if you go between the 60 killed rather than 70 killed, you can say 10% are actually killed by the operation. The rest are killed by the weather and their own engineering. How is that now inconclusive? The Austrians didn't do bad as Onzo. Seneca like the Japan attacking Pearl Harbor with 2 aircraft on November 7th, and then the real attack on December 5th. If they'd done that, yes. Doctor, these men were flying for how many hours for their arrival through a storm? A long time. We are sort of looking at it as they take off at 0900 hours. The strike arrives at 2000 hours. So we're talking 11 hours flying time. 11 hours flying time. Dr. Clarke, Nimitz retreated the USN carrier fleet from forward operating base to Elswick for Operation Olympic. There was a major impact on Operation Dan. Yeah, but there was. Let's put it this way: yes, he has withdrawn things, but there's still a major carrier force there. In nicest way, if they think 19, that the stats say 15. There is, it doesn't really matter. 15 carriers, if they had sent enough force to sink 15 carriers, and they had sunk all 15 carriers, that would have had an effect on American operations. Losing 15 carriers, it probably wouldn't have slowed them up too much, but it would have delayed things a little bit. Roads tend to be on land, carriers tend to be on sea. Look, these are atolls. I'll forgive them. I'm probably being a bit cruel on the pilot here because this is the atoll we're talking about. I can see how they could make they could get confusions, but there's still part of them which is just going. That crew they flew for 11 hours. They were prepared to do it. Their aircraft, they didn't, if it murmured or anything, they didn't use an excuse to turn back. They just kept going. And, yeah. Virginia, the USA had almost as many aircraft carriers in this battle as the IJN had ships in the Midway attack. I don't know. How long did it take to repair the baseball diamond? I'm not sure, but I think the CBs did it fairly quickly. You know, they say just how deeply had the American intelligence penetrated the Nigerian planning cells? Not at all. So, in a nice way, this isn't on them. Even that, I don't think even American intelligence would cook this up because they wouldn't think it would be believable and they would actually do it. Alifi was in range to Tokyo for the C6N2 Psycho Mert with a drop tank. Alifi was being scattered in the last weeks of the war. Yeah. But they weren't operating from Tokyo. They weren't operating from Tokyo. They were operating from Truk for this operation, which I've gone through, Trent, and that was another. We won't go back to that again. But let's put it this way: that was quite a problematic operation. No, sorry. Not even as a Lane could rewrite this is awesome. Every wrote Denmark Street, so we can call this the most completely pointless mission in World War II. Probably. Jeffrey Lund, the damn fuel loan. The fuel loan is priceless considering the waste. Yep. Was it a clear day? No, and by the time they're attacking, it's night. It's 8 o'clock at night. You know, we can be. Let's put it this way: Operation Tan No.1 is not something I think a lot of people would have survived, but it could have actually caused damage. Operation Hugo, the fact it's so similar to the Battle of Philippine Sea does make me believe that it's unlikely to actually work, but it's at least the more viable option than what is actually carried out. You know, so probably just thinking this from a European perspective, I can see how the difficulties these adults will present. Yeah, from a European perspective, think Orkney Islands, those sort of things. You know, Naval, you cannot ask much from a soldier pilot that the average IGN soldier gave them. That they were very brave. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that did go through the US Navy's mind if they heard it was coming. That would require me to watch Azur Lane, Seneca Nero. So far, I've managed to avoid that. I think it's probably a lovely cartoon which gets people into naval history, which is fine by me, but doesn't mean I have to watch it. No, because, and as I've said before, the Emperor by this point was getting quite worried. And when I did the whole Axis Commanders thing, I've got a playlist, yes. Should have. I find the video, the correct video. Chief of Staff. Oh, yeah, Chief of Staff Navy's looking for number. Should put these in their own thing. Not one. Number 18. Yeah, Mitsumasa Yonai. Which he's in. That's in Comet Response. That's Comet Response 1. Part 13. of the Chief of Staff of the Axis Navy series. And he is one of the most experienced and understanding Japanese admirals. And at this point, the Emperor is already asking him, because he's one of the realists, going, this is not sensible. The Emperor is already talking to him. I'll put a link to that video below in the description, because I love that. That video is another one I like. I like the Kantai Kessen one. I've done some good videos on the Japanese. I'm still not quite sure how I've done it, but yeah. I have to find time to watch this from the beginning. You're going to see a lot of sarcasm, friend. Santa Clara, I did a bit of file editing on in UAD. I have a destroyer with 21 20-inch quad turrets. That's scary. Warning. 20-inch quad turrets. That's assume that's torpedoes. Right. No, I haven't seen your tweets yet about the Eurocruiser, but that's mainly because, and don't worry about this, my mum had to do some medical appointments today, so it's been fun times. Wikinger was a German operation 1940 where the Luftwaffe attacked to sink 2 cruisers and destroyers with bombs on a minefield. Yeah, I think have I done a video about that, or have I discussed it in a live? I think I discussed it in a live. That is guns. The clipping is but you've armed the destroyer with 21-inch 20-inch quad turret in 20-inch quad turrets. That also they shoot as fast as 2-inch. I'm not sure how you've done that on UAD, but that's scaring the life out of me. It's just it's just absurd what happens in this operation. This is one of those operations that you get really quite annoyed by. The Japanese officially ascribed the failure of Tan No.2 to unreliable aircraft engines and too great a distance required to be flown by the strike aircraft. The 10 P-1Y aviators, including squadron leader Lieutenant Kuramura, survived the raid, and Lieutenant Kuramura and Warrant Officer Nagami, who was another important person in the operation, both survived the war. So yeah. It's kind of interesting, some of the people involved in this operation and what happens to them and how the war goes on. It's also interesting that some of the people who are involved get into really quite interesting results after the war. But this just no. It's not. It's an operation which has got no reason to be carried out as it is. This is just... Sorry, I know I should be speaking more because you're watching, and I don't like to sit here silent, but sometimes when I actually get through these videos, and I can do this more of a long patrol than I can with a live, I sort of cut out some of the silences because I'm just in here, and every time I go through the information, it's like my brain's hearing it again and going, I had put this in the back of my mind, and I had thought it wasn't quite this way. There must be some logic behind it. And again, I come down to they did it because they could, not because they should. This is Tan No.2. The Tan No.1 never happens, and so it's only Operation Tan No.2. Operation Tan No.2 is the only one that actually goes through. They start off by looking at You Go, and then when they realize they can't do You Go, they develop Tan No.1. And when they can't do Tan No.1 because the US Navy moves to Ulithi, they come up with Tan No.2. Seriously, one of your best and longest rants. I'm sorry it's been a long rant. It's just absurd. Okay, we're going to go to the end and we're going to start on, and we're going to answer the questions for a bit. Next 15 minutes, I'm going to answer questions. And then we're going to call it a day. And I'm going to answer the questions because I'm sure you have them. And it's a good way for me to stop ranting. It's good for my blood pressure. So, Scott, we do what we must because we can. I think, how bad was it for the US Navy that a kamikaze knocked out the USS Enterprise? It was a morale thing, but it didn't sink it, so it actually kind of burnished the Enterprise's reputation even more. Oh. Sonic Canary, you just caused the doctor to short circuit of it. I will be definitely checking out your Destroyer on Discord. Ow. I don't know. Okay. When you're reduced to acts of desperation like this, maybe you'd better think about changing the enemy war. Or actually doing a proper operation. Because if you can do a proper operation, Charge of Light Brigade probably is going to be started off with that poem again, this one on Long Patrol. What replaced Cordite in RN rebuilt World 1 RN battleships and battlecruisers? Oh, well that's quite simple. Basically, they just used improved grades of Cordite. SC was used in from 1927, and flashless Cordite NF was used by the Royal Navy during the Second World War. So basically, what was Cordite replaced with? Better versions of Cordite. That's good. I mean, at least the US noticed this one, unlike the second Hawaii strike. Yeah, they noticed it, but you have to wonder how many people noticed it for hitting the Randolph and how many people noticed it for hitting the baseball diamond. Andrew, off topic question, if I may, in UAD Alpha today, I managed to design a 9,500 ton convoy escort cruiser with 75 4-inch guns, 25 turrets, plus 8 torpedo tubes. Would such a vessel be useful? Depends when you're building it for. If you're building it for World War One, it's probably very useful. If you're building it for World War Two, then that sounds to me like an AA cruiser, in which case you'd probably be going for a bigger gun. So you'd be looking at a more general purpose weapon. 4.5 inch, potentially. 5 inch probably is the equivalent of it if you're in the designing a British or American vessel. So if you'd gone to a 5 inch gun, which you might not be able to get the same number of 25 or 75 guns in, although 25 turrets, 25 treble turrets is pretty interesting. 5 inch guns probably more likely, but 4 inch is good for First World War, and for AA in early World War II would have been very useful. It might not have gone out with convoys that often unless it was incredibly slow. So anyway, I got the DD with 20-inch guns because of the file editing. I built a DD with a lot of 2-inch guns and then set in the file replaced gun 2x1 with gun 20x4. Yay! But it does damage like 20-inch guns at firing a rate of 2-inch guns. Ouch! 14th next month. What do we have on the 14th? Let me just check. 14th, well, not the 14th of March, 14th of April, will be RMS Titanic, and that's going to be possibly slightly late because I'm coming back on that day. It's going to be later than normal. I'm away, so I might well be cancelling Brew Ships 78 for the 10th of April because of where I am. Because I may be able to do it, I might not be able to do it on the Sunday. But I get back on the 14th, and I'm driving from north of London. It's technically an hour's journey, finishing at 5, so technically I should make it for 6:30, but I think I've scheduled it for 7, so 7:30 now to give me the guaranteed time to get home. Because it shouldn't be, it's going to be a nice sort of calm one, is what I'm trying to do. Nice. Could the Western Wyvern have been operated from an escort aircraft carrier? That would have been interesting. Theoretically, with adjustments, including probably some rocket-assisted takeoff, a la Swordfish, you could have done so. But you're going to have to do a lot of work to the escort carrier and the Wyvern to get it to work. She would have had the new Cordite because their new Cordite was flashless for night fighting. That was one of the reasons why they're putting it in. Is there any news about naval engagements in the Black Sea? Some coming through, but mostly that's going to be in Bill Trump's next week. Take care, Yellow Sage. Alright, please, Doctor, on Discord, make a channel for UAD creations. I think I might well add something in for UAD creations. I think it'd be quite fun. Oh, you probably will find on the 14th. You will probably find a fluffy research system will be in here with me. When I get home from those trips, they tend to operate on a policy of we're not letting Papa get out of our sight. We haven't had proper walkies since he's been away. My sister tries very hard, and my mum. They try to do the same level of the walks I do,
And they do time-wise, but the dogs never seem as happy with their walks as they do with mine. I have no idea what I do differently, other than probably carry a lot more biscuits in my pockets, but that's because I'm cynical. UAD stands for Ultimate Animal Dreadnoughts. It's if you ever watch the videos, long patrols I do where I do the ship design stuff, I usually have a section from UAD in there because I can put together ships fairly easily now. And introductions. Hello, NHP. How you doing? Love your video. Really enjoying discussion on cordite. Was the cordite used in the filming of the Battle of the River Plate flashes? Then, where are you driving? Well, not really. It was in real life. I think it would have been, but yeah, in the filming, no. And I'm teaching for Justin Craig for a few days. I'm course director up at a residential centre up north of London. So if you go onto the Justin Craig website, you can soon figure out, because if I'm not, there's 2 residential centres they run. I'm not supposed to say which ones we run, but I'm allowed to say whether it's north or south London. North or south London. I'm not doing the one south of London. I'm doing the one north of London. Strider, I'm not sure what you just tried to post, but I didn't like it. I will have a try to get that 96831. The new cordite was just explosive to It was fairly good. There are advantages and disadvantages. You will accept. Let's put it this way: for something which is flashless, so won't show you up your position at night when you're firing it, you will accept something which is slightly less explosive. Because let's be honest, if it's 1% less explosive, you can either pack a slightly bigger charge, which is perfectly viable, but not a flash, and you can modify. So yes, it can be less explosive, but then you put more of it in. So basically, if someone's less explosive, it's per unit of measurement less explosive, so you can pack in more, and that's what you have to do. Which then can have effect on how much barrel you have to go through, but of course, it's not going to be that massive amount. It's not going to actually have an impact on the level of length of barrel you have for the shell to actually pass up. If you do need to put in that much more that your shell is now having to be launched from halfway up the barrel, then you probably need to. Then you're not going to be doing it. That's right. Thank you, Doctor. See you on Sunday, and thanks for the lives, rant, and small comment for both of them. Why did you guys make 82 and 83 so depressing? Please, for goodness sake, make 84 less thing, please. Yeah. We're trying to. The 84 should be better. I'm hoping to get a good couple of guests. NHP and Night Productions. I like NHP, by the way. That's easy going forward. Go for it. I might use it. Going forward. Oh, okay, I'll have a look at Discord, but if it mucks up the live transmitting, it's not on me. Right then, let's open up Discord. There is a interesting... If Operation Tan No.2 had been attacked on the Iron, how much worse would it go? I don't think there would have been any damage done. That sounds egotistical, but honestly, look at the damage done to Randolph, and then imagine that's an unarmored hangar carrier. They might still have an impact on the back, but it's unlikely, considering the way they stood up to resistance as things went. There are some interesting spaceships appearing. in here. Oh. I got distracted by a message from Paul from Chicago. Let's go through quickly. So, it's in ship animate if you must, is it? This one? Ah, yes, Sakanero. Oh my lord! Anna, that's quite cool. I like yours. Anna, I do like that. Oh my. That would be a nightmare for aircraft to attack. That'd be a case of, hello, I am the ship version of the short Sunderland. And Seneca Nero, I'm actually slightly troubled by that particular ship, mainly from the perspective of I think it's one of the few ships which could actually fire its guns and then end up no longer in the same place. But cool. But I honestly think it would fire its guns and then would no longer be where it was. Oh my god. There you go, Gazebo. I really wish we had more pre-journal battles. Well, I'm considering doing some of those in UAD, so we'll hopefully get to see some of those at some point. I'll be able to walk through. And take care, Trent, and good luck, everyone. It's now roughly 9:30 for me, so I'm going to start packing up and in sort of answering fun questions and hoping you've all had a nice evening and enjoyed this video. And as I said, tomorrow's long patrol is going to be, I've got, I'd say, another 10 minutes here. So, 10 minutes to the end. And then tomorrow's long patrol is going to be on the Battle Agates. And this will be Monday's long patrol, which will be fun. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Stafford. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Dan, for all your adminning. Thank you very much for doing the work this evening. Thank you, Jack Ray, Thomas Van der Velde, Alzaski, Seneca Nero, Knight 6831, Leo Gazebo, DG40, Carl Van Gasberg, and everyone else for all the wonderful questions and chats. Thank you as ever for everyone's support on the Hyder Fund, and thank you for everyone's support in terms of super chats, Patreon. As you know, the Patreon vote is currently ongoing. I'm watching that results quite distinctly. I will make the point on the Patreon, and this should be considered. For Patreon, the current vote is actually pretty darn close. March Patreon vote, there are a lot of options. And that was because there were a lot of good suggestions. But currently, Colin Cameron, Malta Its Many Sieges, is on 10, as is Samuel Spratt's Theoretical and Practical Use of Self-Propelled Torpedoes, 1874 to 1899. However, I kid you not when I say there are Ethan's, McKinney's Into All Reforms of the Italian Navy is on 9, Rick Vasalla's Admiral Kimmel is on 9, Bijon's Selborne Fisher Scheme is on 9. The Samuel Spratt Baltic is on 9. The Freeman Anglo-Japanese War in 1939 is on 9. And the Wayne Borin's Destroyer Doctrine is on 9. So there are 2, 4, 6 on 9 and 2 on 10. Now, as it's always, it's the 2 highest voted ones which get through. But that shows you how close they all are running. There is none on 8. There are about 4 on 7, and the rest are on 6, and there's even one on 4, sadly enough, which is the Thunderbirds one, which is on 4. But again, you're all allowed to go in and vote as many times as you like, and the vote is open. The vote has 2 days left at the moment. Thank you, Eric Sar. This has been interesting and depressing, but interesting. I'm glad it's been interesting more than depressing. Stafford, I got 2 bots today. You're just basically Stafford is one of those people who is not an admin because of just love of the channel. He's an admin because he's an ardent bot hunter, and racking up these bots. Someday we're going to get a picture posted on Discord of his wall, and it's going to be full of stuffed bot heads or fuzzy sort of robots which are mounted on the wall to represent all the bots he's killed. I'm expecting to see this at some point. I'm sure I will, though. I'll look forward to your 2 latest videos. I'll go and have a look at them. Take care, everyone. I bet you won't mince your sarcasm in the LP. It will be strong. The sarcasm for this one will be strong. 112 tons of cordite exploding is equal to how big of a nuke? Ooh. Well, we usually express explosions of power in terms of TNT equivalency. So formulas, cordite N. Gonna be this will be would actually be something I'd have to spend a while doing some research on to be quite sure about. But cordite is roughly equivalent to that. Ooh, is it, or is it that one? Ooh. Composition B, composition C. I'm actually going to have to look this one up to work it out, because you have to work it out back into TNT equivalents and then work it out from there. But it's pretty darn powerful. Okay, thank you very much for those questions. Right. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Seneca Nero. Thank you, Star George Newman. Thank you, Colin Cameron. Nice to see everyone. Thank you. I will get back to you on that question. Can you send me on Discord so I have it to go and look into it? And I'll go look into it. I might add it as a little short at some point. Sam Thompson, I do have an idea for a bot board, but haven't made it yet. After the move, though. See, I was being a little bit jokey, but I did have a suspicion that was coming. The trouble is, Stafford, you'll have to share that bot board idea with Dan and Sean, and possibly Paul as well, so that all four of you can get in on it. Yeah, great. I level the votes out to get as many as ties as possible. That's just cruel. Thousands of tons of cordite will be on our ship. Low, but still thousands. If we consider during... Right. So, during World War One, pre-World War One, the RN and British government were making between 6,000 and 8,000 tons of cordite a year, and they had. I think it was actually between 7,500 and 9,500 tons per year was being built in the UK. They could actually make 13,000 tons of cordite a year. And so you're dealing. Battleships could have low thousands of tons of cordite. Because once you add it all up, because it could not just in the charges for the battleship main guns, but for the smaller guns and all the other things, you get a lot of cordite. And that's off the top of my head. I'm adding up putting the maths together. It's a lot of cordite you're putting into the ships. And I know D-Day caused a drop in the amount of cordite stored in Britain. And thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you. As said, next week's long patrol of the cruiser series is the Glorious Heritage class from the Andromeda series. And as I've said, if you want to do a live discussing the Systems Commonwealth and the Glorious Heritage class and their ship designs, your model I will be turning not this Sunday, but next Sunday into one if you fancy it. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Hope you've had a good time. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as anyone can. It is a bit depressing, I do admit. And thank you very much. With Colin Cameron, I'm watching this playing a UAD campaign. I've just got a straggler battle with a 16-inch N3 G3 design and a 40-inch battleship. A 15-inch battleship. Why is this familiar? Well, enjoy. Take care, everyone. Thank you, and hope you enjoyed it.